Okay, so I've been upgraded to this track. Hopefully I won't let anyone down. I'm going to talk about designing APIs as a human. So what is that? Well, that's a good question, and I hope you're going to enjoy my presentation. So API design is hard, and something that's even harder is to reach out to developers and create an API that they can understand, that not only as a human you can understand, but also as a machine. So machine-readable APIs documentation is hard. Explaining that documentation to developers is even harder. A little bit about myself. My name is Orlando. I'm half Greek, half Italian. I live in London. Woo! Yeah, half and half. The best. Mediterranea, exactly. So you get, the best. I live in London, so my accent is a bit misplaced, so to speak. And what I like to do in my spare time is I go to hackathons, I come to amazing conferences, just like this one, and I write Python, JavaScript, and a little bit of PHP. When I'm in London, I also run a bunch of events, like meetups, open source user group, like the London Node user group, etc., etc. And I work for one of the best companies in San Francisco, and that's Mashape. So what is Mashape? How many here have heard about Mashape? Okay, a lot of hands. How many here are developers? Whoa, nice. So what Mashape is, Mashape was born as like GitHub for APIs, as a marketplace and GitHub for APIs. So we are a platform that builds a lot of open source tools, but what used to be our main offering for today is the marketplace. So if you have an API and you want to reach out to like over 150,000 developers, you can take your API, document it, and put it on Mashape with a very nice user interface, and you can add services like pricing, monitoring, user access control, all that for free on Mashape. So if you haven't heard of Mashape, go check it out. Some of the cool tools we built on Mashape is tools that make being a developer, an API developer, is a better person. So things like UniRest. UniRest is like the universal REST library. It basically allows every developer to consume REST APIs in their favorite languages. So we support like PHP, Python, JavaScript, C#, Objective-C, and all these kind of cool languages, even less cool languages. Another tool that we came out with is APIembed.com. What this does, it allows you to write your API once and be able to create code snippets in many different languages all at once from one single JSON file. We have 10 plus languages. We even support OCaml, if anybody here is familiar with language, which is pretty cool. If you haven't, check it out, APIembed. And then another cool tool for developers that we develop is Mockbin. So it allows you to like mock APIs and debug them in real time. So you create like your own static API, you hit it with your client, and you see what it responds. And you can edit this on the fly. Other tools we work on is like API Analytics. It's in private beta. It allows you to create a dashboard and to analyze your own API from the inside. So you drop in a library and you get all the analytics, how many errors, how many successful requests, and all these kind of metrics in a nice visualized fashion. Super good if you're like an API product manager, or if you're like a person who's like debugging APIs. Super cool tool. You don't have to go through logs and all that stuff. It's all nicely defined for you in a visual manner. And then the king of what we've been releasing recently, it's the Kong. So hopefully many of you have heard about Kong, which is our pole position product for this year. It's an open source proxy for doing API management. So you can install it on your premise, and it allows you to do things like rate limiting. It allows you to do things like authentication, all that. It sits on top of your API, and it allows you to do all this kind of stuff. It's really cool. Kong supports unlimited amount of APIs, and the cool thing about Kong is literally because it's based on Nginx, so it's a super waterproof technology. Everyone knows what Nginx is capable of. And it's also extendable with Lua plugins. You can create your own plugins for Kong, and you can also like redistribute them in the open source community. So for example, right now we're creating like a bunch of different plugins, but the ones that Kong ships with are, like I said, you have like rate limiting. So you can define with a RESTful interface for example, if this endpoint, somebody connects to it, how many times can it hit it per minute or per hour or per day or per year? And you can limit that to your particular use case. And it's really cool. You should definitely check it out. If you go on www.getkong.org, you'll get everything in one portal. Kong uses some really cool technology, Nginx and Cassandra. Cassandra is a database built to scale, and that's why we chose it. It has some really unique features, but you don't have to worry about it because you don't ever see Cassandra running. You just install it, and Kong manages that behind the scenes for you. Everything you do on Kong is managed with a RESTful API interface, and we're always working to develop more and more easier way for developers to manage and work with Kong. If you're interested, come and talk to me. This is kind of how it looks, Kong, right? So you have the traditional, the traditional way of doing like architecture with APIs, and then you have the Kong way of doing it. So as you can see, we have all the services for API developers under one single hat, and it communicates with all your kind of different APIs, all managed from one kind of command line interface, right? Like I said, monitoring, authentication, rate limiting, all that kind of stuff. We all take care of that. There's a lot of cool graphs that shows you how fast Kong is and how easy it is to scale it. Again, there's much more information about this on our GitHub repo. If you go on github.com/mashape, Kong is probably the most starred repo we have. Some more details. It's just how fast it is. You probably can't see it very well from here. My slides will be available after the talk. But now let's talk about what makes a good API. There's thousands, if not millions of API out there. Most of them are private, a lot of them are public. So what makes a good API? Well, for me, it's awesome documentation. A good API is an API that's easy to learn, because it's not an API which you have to go through like hundreds or 10, 20 pages to understand how to interface with it. A good API, it's also an API that's hard to misuse. So when you're a developer and you hit the documentation for the API the first time, you know exactly what you're going to do with each endpoint, each method. For example, if you have like an email API, you have like contact lists, or is it contact underscore list? Sometimes you might get confused with all the nomenclature of endpoints and body parameters and all that kind of stuff. So if you're an API creator, always double check that when you create an API, you create great documentation. So people have a hard time misusing it. Another important point about APIs is you want to create documentation that makes it simpler for other developers when your team scales up to maintain it. You always want to look for like the coupling kind of things together. In the scenario where tomorrow your team becomes from 10 developers to 30 and remote, make sure you always have like good documentation. Not only inside the code, but also as like additional documentation in your GitHub repo, or if you use any kind of developer portal, that kind of place. Another cool thing about good APIs is the ability to extend. You don't want to create resources that are depending one on each other. So you want to create it in a way that when you create new resources, you think with a future view. So you say, if I change this thing, how is it going to affect tomorrow the evolution of my API? The API is a living thing. It's like a kid. You teach it some tricks, then tomorrow you teach them some more tricks. And then the kid grows up, has an education of its own, and grows up and becomes a very, hopefully, great human person. So is your API. So your API starts from the basic stuff, and then you added more functionalities, you add more users come to your API, and therefore it grows, and you have, as a parent of that API, it's harder to make it scale and to get it right. You don't want to have bad kids, right? And then obviously an API needs to be appropriate to the audience. Each API might come with different use cases. You as an API developer and an API product manager, you have to kind of understand which are the best use cases that your API works for. And what you want to do is, you take those use cases and you document them really well. Because you know that probably 80% of your developers hitting your API will probably do that 1 or 2 or 10 use cases. How many of you have seen this? This is from XKCD. If you're not familiar with it, it's basically about don't over-engineer stuff. If you over-engineer stuff, you're not doing it right, okay? Okay, so how do you design a good API? Well, that's a good question. Kong comprehensive documentation is what I'm focusing on. So documentation, as Bruno spoke about before, changes, and you need to like keep track of the change log and all that kind of stuff. The first thing I do when I create a new API is I get together with a bunch of friends or co-workers, I get a big whiteboard, and I start drawing out. But then the following step, right, is taking that design, those ideas, and bring it into like some kind of tool that will help me to be productive. Because sometimes I'm sharing my designs with other people. There's a lot of like benefits in speccing out an API before actually building it. And you'll kind of understand this as I go through my talk. When you implement your API for the first time, like I said, don't go into like the minor details. Take it from like a design approach first. So first you do this design, then you create a mock test API. But design comes first. And always focus on developer experience. Why? Well, you know why. Everybody who uses API knows how important developers are to their product and business. To create a good API, therefore, as I said, you need to pick some kind of modeling language that helps you to create a blueprint of what your API will look like once built and deployed. There are a lot of different modeling languages. You have like RAML, you have YAML, you have a JSON based on Swagger, you have API blueprints, you have IO docs, and every kind of language has their own benefits and disadvantages. But the tip here, the pro tip is that it's whatever works for you. Whichever language you're more familiar with, that your developers know better and makes better sense for you, you should go with it. And now let's jump into like the more cool part of this talk, which is, using tools to create APIs, to spec out APIs. How many of you are familiar with Dreamweaver? Not too many? A lot of people? No? Yes? Somehow? Well, Dreamweaver was a great tool like 20 years ago. But like APIs, they're kind of like lagging behind in that terms. That the web was all web pages. Now APIs need this graphical tool that help you make a big impact faster. So designing and documenting API. There are so many tools out there. How you, as a developer, as an API product manager, which tools is better for you? So, what I said is I'll find all the best tools that I can think of and scrape through the web, and I'll make a presentation about this. Hence why the name of the talk. So the first tool is the API Studio, which supports the RAML language for creating the blueprint. It's web-based. It has an editor that looks kind of like this. So it's very kind of your terminal. Whether you're a Vi or Emacs fan, you probably get used to this look. Or Sublime Text sometimes looks like this as well. It's a web app, like I said. It's very verbose, but it's really like crucial because it helps you really define every single aspect of the API without missing anything. You can also download a Sublime plugin that helps you build this in your favorite text editor if Sublime is your choice. But the kind of the disadvantage is you need to know RAML really well. And RAML is the language that's supported by this tool. Once you created your API, all your endpoints are listed this way. As a developer, this is very useful because you can go and check exactly what each endpoint does and what parameter it might need to work and do its job. When you drill down into the endpoint documentation, each endpoint is even further explained using this tool, and you can create a bunch of meta about this endpoint that, depending on how much you want to add, can be very useful or not. You can also display the response details, so you exactly know what an endpoint will respond to a certain request without having to execute the endpoint. Finally, you have the test console, which is the interactive part of the API Studio, which allows you to run API requests directly from your browser. And then finally, this final tool is the notebook. This is all part of the API Studio, right? It helps you to add more context for your developers. It's like Runnable does. You can add some like code snippets and stuff. It's pretty cool. I kind of rated it as a very flexible tool, but not too very user-friendly. When I checked it out months ago, there was no real onboarding that was easy to get to. So I was a bit confused which tool do I have to jump on first. And it was, you have to read a lot in the documentation section. I'd prefer it if there was a real onboarding. RAML is a great solid language. But the content, like I said, is dispersed. The next tool you're probably all familiar with is API. They built 3 tools, which cuts in documentation. the traffic inspector, and the editor. And this solution uses the API Blueprint modeling language. Again, it's a web-based tool, and it owns, like I said, its own proprietary modeling language, which is API Blueprint, which is based on Markdown. So if you know how to use Markdown, you're probably cool with using this tool. I think the mission is to allow developers to create and collaborate and mock real APIs all from the browser. And it looks a little bit like this. So all based on Markdown, you have the different definition of endpoints, the body request parameters, all the different options, error names, error codes. It's a little bit more verbose than what RAML is, because RAML is based on YAML, and YAML is very kind of sleek, you know, when you see it. This one is more like I said, Markdown. So you need to remember all the codes. You know, what does like one hashtag does, you know. But once you get used to it, you create some beautiful documentation that, again, you can run into the browser from the Documentation Explorer. It's very clean, minimalistic, and you can run quickly all your APIs through this if you know how to map it and release it into the wild so developers can try your API really quickly and flawlessly. Overall, I gave it a better user friendliness because I think the documentation to get started is much more clear in this use case, in this scenario, and it's very flexible as well. The next one is Swagger. Now, I don't need to introduce Swagger. Everybody heard of Swagger. If you didn't, you probably lived under a rock or something. Sorry. Swagger has been recently acquired. I don't remember the name of the company. Smart Bear. Sorry? Smart Bear. Smart Bear. That's it. So Smart Bear. Yeah, they've been using. Did you guys acquire it or promote it, sponsor it? We're sponsoring it. Okay, cool. Thanks. So I missed that part, right? And this is what it looks like. Very similar to the first tool that I kind of showcased, but at the same time, this one is way more embraced by the open source community. In fact, if you go on GitHub and you look at how many API Swagger definitions there are, there's over like 150,000, so that's a lot. Swagger always comes with a Documentation Explorer that's like a plugin that allows you to like showcase your API into your own developer portal. It supports different type of authentication, and you allow to like group the endpoints by resource or based on whatever you want. And yeah, I mean, there's actually, if I'm not wrong, there is no way of generating code from this. You need to have a plugin. So if you want to know, how do I generate, for example, a Python request to do this exact request, I don't think you can do it without the plugin. So I give it a pretty high score. I think it's very flexible and super user-friendly. And like I said, the community, the open source community loves Swagger. And then this is kind of a shameless plug. Mashape, you know, we're the marketplace for APIs, the largest marketplace in the world. We have our own doc kind of generating system, right? It's very visual, it's very beautiful, very simple to use. It's amazing. It's amazing. Everything is on one page. You have the three-column layout. That's like the new cool thing like kids love. It's intuitive, and it's all guided, so you never get lost. It's really amazing. It's beautiful. We support pretty much all kind of authentication, whether it's like query-based, whether it's part of your URL, OAuth 1, 2, token in the header, token wherever you want. You know, like we support pretty much everything. You should totally check it out if you haven't. And this is what Imager. How many here are familiar with Imager is? The website that helps one hand. Imager, host images on the web, Reddit, yeah, 5 hands. Okay, well, Imgur, come on. Yeah, okay, great. Imgur. Yeah, sorry, the accent, sorry, yeah. So Imgur uses Mashape. They love it, and they have like 40 endpoints, and we handle all their endpoints without like, you know, double thinking. I think it's a pretty cool tool, so I give it a good score. But let's move on. Restlet. Okay, so these guys are like French, and they came up with a really cool tool as well, the Restlet Studio. So it's very neatly organized, pretty much like Mashape is, you know. You can create endpoints and group them. And then the cool thing about this is, with one click, you can create a mock infrastructure that you download from the web app, and you can run it locally to then test against that local infrastructure without having to write a single line of code. So if you're like an API product manager that is not really keen in like knowing the latest cool frameworks to create APIs in Node.js or Python or whatever, you just go here, play with this and create a mock infrastructure. I didn't give it a rating because when I tried this in December, it didn't really, it was working, but it wasn't complete. It was very alpha, and I spoke with the developers, and they said, yeah, it's still alpha, check it out, but, and I was like, okay, cool, I'll check it out. I'm not expecting it to be like Mashape's, So anyway, I'm going to talk about other cool tools. Macaroni. So funny name. This is a tool that only allows you to document and mock APIs. It's all based on the web. It looks something like this, so kind of similar to what Restlet Studio is. It's a very simple API documentation tool that helps you to literally just mock your API from the definition of your endpoints, all written in the browser. So it's kind of like API does. You have like a blueprint, but you don't have to write the blueprint, right? Another big player in the scene has been always coming up. They were part of Y Combinator, and they've been kind of featuring on Hacker News a lot lately. Readme.io, there are a bunch of cool guys. They're based in San Francisco next to our office at Mashape, and we're really friendly with them, and they're really cool people. The cool thing about Readme.io, it allows you to not only create documentation for RESTful APIs, but even for cakes or whatever you can imagine, right? It's a very, very extensible tool. When you create an API, it kind of looks like this. So again, the very beautiful defined approach in the browser with multiple options and creating endpoints in there. Very, like I said, what you see is what you get approach. They have version control inbuilt inside the tool so that when you change your API, you can track what has changed. They also have a blogging system that allows you to interact with the community. And this kind of leads us to my last kind of reviewed tool, which is Gelato.io. So that's an Italian word for ice cream, if you didn't know. And it's literally a cool dev portal. It's like, ice cream. It's super alpha. I got access this morning. So here, that's what it looks like. So you have a dashboard that tells you how many developers have checked your documentation. That's very similar to other tools. And then it looks like this. You can create endpoints on the left-hand side and then kind of, play around with the tool. Like I said, it's very alpha. Don't expect it to be enterprise level ready. And then you can customize the look and feel for your developer portal. And the idea behind Gelato, you create a standing alone dev portal for your API, just for your API, that you can add to your homepage so developers go there and they feel at home, right? But all managed with a kind of a CMS kind of mentality. And then I lied because there's another few tools, sorry. APIdays, one of the sponsors of APIdays in Sydney as well. They're hailing all the way from New Zealand, and they create a high-quality SDK generation tool. So the way it works is that you define your API there, and then you go through all the steps, and then you see that bar at the bottom. Well, you can create SDKs for Windows phones, iOS, Android, Java, PHP, some other stuff I can't really see, etc., etc. So, and the cool thing about this is, because it's all visual, you can update your API and generate new SDKs on the fly. So if you're a company that relies a lot on generation of SDKs for interacting with developers, you should totally check them out. It looks a little bit overwhelming from the kind of UX perspective. There's a lot of stuff going in the one page. And that's where the next contender, Rest United, all the way from Hong Kong. Woo! So these guys, they take a more modular approach. So it's more step-by-step, it's more curated, and it allows you to do, again, a generation of SDKs. They don't support, all the authentication schemes like APIdays does. They're, again, a more alpha kind of beta product, but they're getting there. And you can also debug with Postman. So if you don't know what Postman is, you should have probably checked what Simon said during his talk. Postman is a great tool. So that kind of almost concludes my presentation. What's on the other side? So I was reading Kinlane's blog, and I was like, so what is the next step? What is there? What is missing? So from my perspective and Kinlane's perspective and another bunch of you developers who I've spoken with, there's things like being able to share openly. Your blueprint is missing. There is no GitHub of API blueprints. It would be cool if there was one portal where you can just go and get like kind of a, like a blueprint for this API and fork it with one button and then collaborate over that. There's no one-stop place to generate SDKs without going through like third-party tools. So if this one portal existed where you could, use whatever modeling language you could and generate your blueprint and create SDKs and be able to embed your API into maybe, I don't know, a Twitter timeline or your own blog, like kind of Gist does for GitHub, it'd be much cool. So that's what's on the other side. If you want to talk with me and you're interested in developing something like a Flickr of API where you can showcase APIs, please do get in touch. Another feature that's missing from a lot of these tools is the changelog factor. So like API changelog is trying to like fill the gap, is having it inside your own documentation portal. Therefore, just to quickly sum up, it's important to collaborate and share API blueprints, because if everybody, like kind of share their knowledge, we'd be in a much better place, and the industry would be even faster. Healthy design practices for APIs comes from iterating. So iterate, get feedback from developers, go to hackathons, organize hackathons, be a nice guy, be nice to developers. And finally, there's a whole life cycle that goes between design to documentation. And there are so many steps in between that are crucial that you should not miss. And that's all I have. So stay frosty and see you at the beer that we just sponsored down there. So yeah, thank you.
So we have time for a few questions, yeah. But so the Mashape business was first about the marketplace, but all the two open source tools that you should showcase at the beginning are really useful, and they're open source, so it's really good. So we have time for a few questions.
Really good beer.
So just an example, who already use an API description language like Ramel, Swagger, Blueprint, or whatever? Yeah. Okay, who is Ramel? Who is Swagger?
Yeah, Swagger.
Yeah. No. Who use Ramel? Who use Ramel? Yeah. Okay. Who use Blueprint?
API Blueprint from
API Blueprint.
One hand.
Yeah.
Two.
Yeah, three hands.
Three.
Okay. Yeah, few.
More. Any questions?
Who use Mashape editor? Yeah, a few. Okay.
Well, if you haven't checked mashape.com, that's the best, chance to check it out, right?
So one question about the editors, API descriptions, maybe?
Or questions about Kong, you can find me, or Augusto who's there, and we have the Mashape swag, and just come and talk to us, and we can help you understand why and how Kong will help you do a better job at creating safe APIs.
Getkong.org is really cool stuff. But thank you, Orlando, for this almost natural talk, right?
Supernatural.
Yeah, but the thing, he made an article about all this stuff where he explains naturally in the article exactly what are the difference and everything. So you will share it maybe with the slides. Okay.
Yeah, sure. So I wrote a Medium article just before Christmas that went like super viral on Hacker News and a lot of other websites. People kept tweeting it, and I thought that's a great opportunity for me to write a talk about this, and that's why I came up with this talk, pretty much. So it's all based on real evidence. It's not like I made it up.
Yeah, but on stage you have
it feels better.
A Mashape enthusiasm.
Oh yeah, sure,
Yeah,
sure. Thank you, guys.
Warm applause, please. Thank you.